are about to have an important and timely conversation with General Pekka Toveri. He served in Finland's armed forces for 35 years and now chairs the EU-Ukraine Parliamentary Association Committee. A strong voice in Europe's defense and a long-time supporter of Ukraine, General Toveri brings both military experience and political insights into one of the most urgent challenges facing the continent today. Mr. Toveri, thank you for joining us.
It's great to be here with you. Thank you.
So I listened to your recent lecture during the EU debates, and I truly appreciate your thoughts and clarity. You said, "Don't lecture us on peaceful Russia." Why do some countries still believe that it's possible to appease a dictator, to negotiate with an aggressor who kills children simply because they are Ukrainians? Where does this illusion come from, and how dangerous is it for Europe's long-term security?
Well, that's a good question, and I think that our big problem is that people don't read enough history. For us Finns, it's very easy. You know, last 400 years we've had something like 30 wars with Russia. We know that the attack always comes from that. We know how Russia acts as the most imperialistic country in the world. But I think that further you go away from Russian borders, less people understand how Russia behaves, and they see and try to think Russia as a normal state and government, which it's not. What it is a bit difficult to understand that many European countries have a history of dealing with dictatorships during the Second World War, for example, and they haven't learned anything from that time. For example, how to handle Hitler. You know, they tried to do appeasement, even though history shows that you can't appease dictators.
Yeah, true. So it means like the further you're from Russia, the more you try to appease Putin. Oh, is that correct?
That is correct. They seem to believe in the Western Europe that you can negotiate with Putin, that you can make a deal with him which he would hold, and they don't understand that. Well, Putin has his own vision, his own targets, and he hasn't giving up any of those. Plus, that you can't trust any of his promises because he has broken all his agreements so far.
And what are the consequences with that approach?
Well, the consequences is that since Western countries don't understand that the only way to handle dictators like Putin is to use force, we haven't supported Ukraine fast enough and not big enough amounts of support so that Ukraine could win this war. You know, if Ukraine would have gotten already 2022 all the support that's been given it during these 3.5 years, the war would have ended already because the Russian armed forces autumn 22 were on their knees totally. But since in West people think that, well, we can't provoke Russia, we have to think about how we support Ukraine so that we don't cross any red lines. We've given Putin time to recover from all these losses and created the situation where the war just continues.
Yeah, Mr. Toveri, speaking about Ukrainian military strength, how do you evaluate the Ukrainian armed forces' latest successful actions, and what do they signal about Ukraine's current battlefield capabilities and resilience?
Well, it tells that Ukrainian armed forces are excellent in innovation, using technologies in very innovative way, thinking ways to surprise the Russians. Plus, then in the front lines, the Ukrainian armed forces have shown huge resilience and stamina, continue fighting even though they are facing overwhelming odds. I'd say the biggest message is that Russia is not about to win, and Ukraine is not about to lose this war. But what we should do, again, is from Western side is to double our support to Ukraine, for example, because continuing supporting Ukraine in this current level just means that war tracks on because we don't give Ukraine enough measures, tools to win this war.
Yeah, but I've heard the idea from Western journalists and analytics that these successful missions of Ukraine, it will not change anything like serious on the battlefield, but it has a serious psychological effect. Do you agree with that, and why?
Yeah, I totally agree. Russia is using these strategic bombers mainly to send missiles to hit Ukrainian civilian infrastructure to kill civilians. It doesn't have too much effect on Ukrainian armed forces military capability. But the fact that you were able to hit thousands of kilometers inside Russia and their most valuable strategic assets this easily creates shockwaves through the Russian armed forces and Russian government. They've been paranoid already. They will be even much more paranoid because now everything, every single truck can be a platform for attack against them. So this will tie up a lot of their resources to internal security, which hopefully are away from the front lines.
Yeah, and based on your assessment, how close is Ukraine to becoming military independent? Is this a realistic scenario in the near future?
Well, I wouldn't say it in the near future. It will take several years, and I think that another area where West could support more. Ukraine has done wonderful things with your defense industry. You have increased the capacity of your defense industry over 30 times in 3.5 years. Meanwhile, in West, we are still talking about it. So the most wise thing for us would be to support Ukraine, give money to Ukrainian government so that Ukrainian government could put your own defense industry to work. So that, and if you would do that in a couple of years, I'm pretty sure that Ukrainian defense industry would be able to supply the armed forces in the needed levels. But since this hasn't happened yet, I think that it will take 2-3 more years before we are in that point.
And how do you assess the idea of Ukrainian forces to create Ukrainian air defense?
Well, I think that again, the same thing that you have good grounds for that. You've used in the beginning of the war, the Ukrainian armed forces used its old Soviet air defense capabilities, S-300 systems and Buk systems and so on, very successfully denying Russian air forces the possibility of taking air supremacy over Ukraine, which was a great achievement considering the odds. Some of the most capable Western systems, like Patriots, starting to develop those kind of systems or building those kind of systems in Ukraine. I think that might take a little bit more time and effort, and it would require the technological changes and movement this technology to Ukrainian defense industry. So it would take a little bit more time, I think.
But it's not like mission is impossible, right?
No, it's not a mission impossible. And the fact is that most of the aerial targets hitting Ukraine, like cruise missiles, the Shahed, like UAVs, and so on, they are downed by Ukrainian armed forces with the weapon systems that Ukrainian defense industry can build. The biggest problem is kind of like ballistic missiles, where you could require high-end air defense system like Patriot. So those systems are a bit more demanding to build.
And speaking about the support of Europe, more concrete, what steps should Europe take next to support Ukraine? Military, politically, economically? Are EU institutions moving fast and decisively enough from your perspective?
Well, my personal view is that we are moving far too slow. I think that current discussion is that if United States withdraws its support, we have to replace it. And my message in the Parliament and to European Union Commission has been that replacing the American support is not enough. because that would mean that we just continue supporting at the current level, which has created a long war, which bleeds Ukrainians to death slowly. No, we should double the support so that Ukraine has a capability, as I said, to win this war fast and stop the killing in the front lines. But same time as we should increase the support to Ukraine, direct support to Ukrainian civilian society, direct support, military support, and funding for Ukrainian defense industry, we should also go to offensive, attack the Russian capability to wage this war through much tougher sanctions. You know, the EU is preparing the 18th sanction package, which will hit the Russian oil industries. But all these packages, in my opinion, are too slow and too little. And a lot of things can be done within EU because we are still EU countries are buying gas and oil from Russia. Still, the big part of the shadow fleet is flagged to European Union countries and owned by European Union citizens. And we should hit those to hit the Russian government's economy.
Yeah, and you're saying that still EU buying gas from Russia. Do you mean Hungary and Slovakia?
Well, Hungary and Slovakia are a problem when we talk about Ukraine's EU integration, and yes, in some cases in making sanctions and so on. And definitely we should deal with these two countries very decisively so that they can't sabotage our efforts to support Ukraine. And again, there we should be also much more forceful and use all the tools we have in the box to make those two countries' life difficult if they don't cooperate.
Yeah, and you mentioned about the United States kind of isolation from the world. How do you assess President Trump's strategy of flattery and threats in dealing with the dictator Putin? Did you personally expect this kind of behavior from the United States president?
Well, unfortunately, yes. Seeing how Mr. Trump was with Putin during his first term, we saw that he don't understand Putin. He admires Putin. He refuses to see what kind of dictator and murderer Putin is. And problem is that his second government is filled with people who don't have same kind of background and as Trump's first administration had. In the first administration, you had many seasoned generals who knew very well Russia and how to handle Russia. Now there are people who don't have any background in security and defense or any background about Russia, so they don't even give proper advice to Mr. Trump. On the other hand, on the American Senate, in the Congress, in the Senate and House of Representatives, there's a strong will to support Ukraine, and people, the senators and representatives, understand the Russian threat much better than Trump's administration. So hopefully, the great sanction package that Senator Graham in the U.S. Senate is working with can be put into effect in the coming weeks, because that would be really a big kick towards Russians.
Yeah, big kick towards Russians. But you truly believe about that sanctions will be imposed against Moscow?
I think now we have both the Senate and the House of Representatives, and in both chambers, the chairmen who are Republicans have said that they're supporting this. Clear majority of the representatives and senators support it, and even in Trump's negotiator, General Kellogg, is saying that he believes that this might well go through. So I'm hopeful. I'm quite hopeful that this might fly.
Mm-hmm. And given the uncertainties around the U.S. support, how prepared is Europe to fill the potential gap in military aid? And and actually just to protect itself. If someone will come to your land tomorrow, are you ready for that?
Well, I'd say that first of all, the problem with the U.S. support is that Europe has money, but we don't have weapons. The American defense industry and American armed forces storages are much bigger than anything that Europe has. So we can't replace that capability too fast. It will take years before we are in an adequate level. But meanwhile, we could do a couple of things. We could first, as I mentioned, we could fund the Ukrainian defense industry better, because the Ukrainian defense industry can make equipment 3 times faster with a third of the price that the Western defense industry is producing. So it would be much wiser to give money to Ukraine so that you can make the tools for your defense yourself. Same time, we should take some risk.
Mr. Toveri, should Ukraine begin to focus more seriously on building its own nuclear deterrent as a way to protect itself in the long term? Could Europe play any role, technically, politically, diplomatically, in supporting such a program? I've heard that the Britain is ready to help us with that.
Well, yeah, that's a very good question. Russia, the nuclear threat is something that Russia always has in back pocket, and we've seen that the nuclear weapon is the ultimate deterrence against anybody attacking your country. So and Ukraine, were dealt very wrongly, in my opinion. Ukraine you were the third biggest nuclear power in the world in 1990s when the Soviet Union fell down. And then you trusted the Western European, American and Russian guarantees and gave up these nuclear weapons. And it turned out that all those guarantees were just empty talk. So I understand very well. And this is the place, United States, the Trump government said that they are not willing to give the security guarantees to Ukraine, and that would be the European nations' job. Well, it seems to be that the willingness from bigger European nations to put troops on the ground is limited, and they are thinking that they don't have the capability to give the security guarantees. Well, if we can't give the security guarantees with our conventional forces, yeah, maybe we should support Ukraine to build its own nuclear capability as a security guarantee, And if Russia is demanding, is adamant that Ukraine can join NATO, which I don't think that it's them to decide. But if it's not going to happen, let's give Ukraine something that gives its real guarantee against Russian further aggressions.
Absolutely agree. And historian Neil Ferguson recently wrote his column for New York Post, I guess, that wars don't end with negotiations, they end with victory, suggesting Ukraine could become, the next South Korea if the West applies real pressure. Do you agree with this view?
That there would be kind of a demilitarized zone and a frozen zone between Ukraine and Russia, with a lot of forces, kind of thing, or because I'm not familiar with that theory.
Yeah. Okay. And what are your top priorities as chair of the EU-Ukraine Parliamentary Association Committee, especially, when we will come closer to winter? How do you plan to coordinate energy security, military support, and Ukraine's need, watching how the U.S. policy is changing?
Yeah. Well, the Parliamentary Association Committee itself is the main task is to concentrate on the Ukraine's future EU integration and membership in Ukraine, which is very important for the Ukraine's future. So we work on that, trying to put pressure on Commission and the Council so that the process continues. The plan is to open the first chapter this summer, and we know that Hungary, for example, it might be opposing it. but nevertheless we should continue and keep the process alive so that by 2030 Ukraine would be full member of EU. That would make Ukraine economically stronger, would make it easier for us to support Ukraine's growth and also give some kind of security guarantees. But this is the future thing, and the current thing is, of course, to get the support to Ukraine so that Ukraine can continue fighting, so that we can have a peace on terms that Ukraine can accept and are fair. And there, the Parliamentary Association Committee don't have that big a role, but our role is to keep Parliament aware of what's going on, so that we can inform all the parties in the European Parliament about the situation and the possibilities, so that then we can together put pressure to Commission to increase the support if needed, increase the sanctions towards Russia and so on.
Yeah, and finally, do you think that Ukraine, and I'm quite sure with your help also, is still on the agenda of the European Union?
It's very much, I'd say that we talk about Ukraine almost daily, at least weekly. It's a very there are a lot of people who very actively keep the Ukrainian issues on the agenda of the Parliament and inform people. It's a wide variety of things that people are doing, and people are talking. Parliamentary members of Parliament are arranging different happenings and spreading information about Russian crimes, kidnapping kids, how they treat prisoners of war, the attacks against civilian population, possibilities to do sanctions, and etc. etc. So Ukraine is very central in our agenda weekly.
Mr. Toveri, thank you for your direct and honest answers. Thank you for being with us in our studio of Channel 24, and I hope we'll see you again here.
Definitely. Thank you for giving this chance, and have a good coming weekend. Hopefully not too many attacks, and Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава. Дякую.